I've been a little obsessed with Star Trek lately, and honestly, going through so many years of like comics, movies, media, it can be a little daunting to start. So, here are some of my favorite Star Trek recommendations for comics. Honestly, my favorite thing about Star Trek comics is that it's so rare that you get one that's like so bad, like legitimately just awful. Although there is one that I stopped reading because I don't know, it was just boring to me. So I just flipped through it for like the exciting parts. You would think a comic titled Who Killed Captain Kirk would be exciting, but for whatever reason, it's just not. It's just kind of boring. So that's the only one I didn't read all the way through and I just kind of skipped through. But otherwise, I think any Star Trek comic that you pick up and read is at least going to be okay. Like, you're not going to have strong feelings about, oh, this is the worst comic I've ever read. It's just kind of like, yeah, this was okay. I can see why people like this if they like this part of the universe. I feel like extra media is the most daunting to start with because, at least with the TV shows and movies, you kind of know where you should start. So that's why it's always nice to have like a little recommendation for comics because they can be a little daunting to get into. Some of these are better entry points than others. Some of these are just my favorite comics. I'm going to be real with you guys. I was going to name this something like top 5 Star Trek comic books. But one, I don't think I've read enough of the Star Trek comic books to definitively say which 5 are the best. And two, it'd be kind of lying because with my Starfleet Academy recommendation, I do kind of just say, and you should read the Star Trek Boldly Go series. So I'm recommending more than 5 books. It'd be cheating to just be like, well, it's the prologue to Boldly Go, so you have to read that after. I mean, you can't just skip it. I'm probably also over explaining my list. Like, I should just let you guys go to the list and get comics recommended for you. But no, you have to listen to my little ramble about it. No, it's not to increase watch time. What are we talking about here? Get out of my face. Let's get started. Starfleet Academy with writer Mike Johnson and Ryan Parrott and artist Derek Charm. This is kind of the prologue to Star Trek Boldly Go comics. Starfleet Academy has 2 different stories. It has the Uhura story that is going on 3 years before the main events, and then it has the main events, which follows a group of young Starfleet cadets. In this comic, Starfleet Academy is celebrating their 100-year anniversary. In this comic, there's hijinks, there's a spaceship race, and a mystery unfolding. I really like this comic. I really enjoyed the brand new characters that they created for this comic that eventually flow into Boldly Go, and those characters will continue on to the Star Trek Boldly Go comics. So I think it's the perfect start for the continuation of those movies. They really hold their own in a universe of already stellar characters. One thing that you'll notice I like in like comic and animated form is that we get a lot more aliens that can be aliens. Even with prosthetics, sometimes it's hard to get the real alien look. How many times can I say alien? Next up on the recommendations, we have Star Trek Motion Picture Echoes with writer Mark Guggenheim and artist Oleg Chudikov. This one's a newer one. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the attention and care that was put into Uhura in this because I feel like she doesn't get the spotlight a lot. So I enjoyed when she was put in the spotlight for this series. You know that I enjoyed this series because I read it without once complaining in my mind about the silly little outfits they have in this movie. They're silly little outfits. Motion Picture Echoes is pulling double duty as it is a sequel to Star Trek the Motion Picture, but it is also a multiverse story. And hear me out. I know I've also been tired of multiverse stories, but this one does it in such a way that it makes sense to me. Like, we're doing a multiverse story, but it is to branch out of more of the characters that didn't get a spotlight and not just make it the Kirk, Spock, and Bones show. I love those characters, I do, but I love getting more of a spotlight on things like Uhura and Chekhov and Sulu. So I think it's really cool that we get that dichotomy and we get more of an insight into their characters. For instance, Chekhov has an existential crisis because his alternate universe self is evil. Honestly, I would have an existential crisis if my alternate universe self was evil and everyone else was normal. Well, relatively normal. I wanted this to be a very varied list, so the next one we have up is a classic edition of the comics. We have Mirrorverse Classic, which is written by Mark Barr and artist Ricardo Villagrán. This is another sequel comic. This is the sequel to Search for Spock. In this comic, we have Mirrorverse shenanigans. I do think it's hilarious how the Mirrorverse version of Spock. In this comic, he legitimately thought about Kirk's suggestion about making the world a better place, his whole speech that he had, and he just made a thought. He's like, maybe, maybe I'll change my mind, but maybe I'll stay the same person. Maybe I won't change. He just becomes the exact same person in this comic, and I find that really enjoyable for whatever reason. He said, no, the fascism thing is really working out for me. Working for the Empire is working out for me, so I'm not going to touch it. I will spoil this comic a little bit, because it's my favorite part of this comic, and I think it needs to be said. In this comic, there's a point where Mirrorverse Saavik is telling Mirrorverse Spock, that Mirrorverse Kirk is a traitor, and Mirrorverse Spock will not take this. He thinks that Saavik is actually our universe's Saavik, and he does not believe it's Mirror Universe Saavik. And so he Vulcan nerve pinches her and is like, no. Mirrorverse Spock believes in Kirk so much that he will not believe that he has become a traitor. It's so good. In every universe, Spock will never believe that Kirk has betrayed him. There is no world where that will happen, and no, actually you're the traitor for even suggesting that. Thank you very much. What is wrong with these two? They are so bad. Going into this comic, I will warn you, it is a classic comic. It is a byproduct of its time. It has the thoughts of someone written from its time. It also has wild inconsistencies in the panels. This isn't just like, oh, someone's red shirt was turned green. No. This is Uhura was turned into a white woman for a panel and then turned back into Uhura type of inconsistencies. But if you still want to read it after that warning, I still recommend it. I still really liked large parts of this comic. For the next recommendation, we have The City on the Edge of Forever, an adaptation of the original teleplay by Harlan Ellison, with writers David and Scott Tipton and artist J.K. Woodward. So, because this is an adaptation of the original teleplay, you would think that this would have a lot of similarities with the eventual episode that did air on television, but there are so many different things they changed. I can see why Harlan Ellison was mad about how much they changed, because this is fundamentally a different episode. I could see why this wasn't put on television back in the 60s, though. There are so many mentions of things that in hindsight makes sense, like the entire subplot in the original episode with McCoy stabbing himself with the medicine. That was an entire drug subplot in the teleplay. It makes sense, because that always seemed weird to me in the original episode. I'm like, okay, McCoy is kind of just weird this episode. No, that was an entire drug subplot with a random person on the Enterprise. There's also these Time Guardian things. I think they look really cool. I think the art in this is phenomenal. It pairs especially well with Harlan Ellison's kind of weird, wacky way of writing science fiction, and I just love it. I don't know why I was shocked to see Edith Keeler in this comic. I know it's the point of the episode, but she's just so normal compared to the random hijinks that are happening in the future. But I don't know. I think it's just because I'm trying to straight separate the teleplay and the episode. While they do have some similarities still, it's so different. It's definitely worth giving a read. There are some parts of the original teleplay that I don't necessarily like, but it's still cool to see Harlan Ellison's original vision adapted. But he was thinking the budget was something else, because how would any of this happen? It works in comic form, because you can just draw whatever you want. But, sir, one of the reasons I did make this video is to recommend Star Trek comics to you guys, but also for my own selfish and nefarious reason to make this was to promote to you guys my favorite Star Trek comic ever, my favorite Choose Your Own Adventure story ever, and that is Star Trek Warp Your Own Way. I think Ryan North is a genius. I think the art by Chris Finoglio is amazing in this, and I think that everyone should read this comic if they have any interest in either Choose Your Own Adventure stories or Star Trek Lower Decks in any way. I was immediately drawn to it because I love Choose Your Own Adventure stories. I think they make the reader feel powerful. I think they make the reader feel like the most powerful narrator in the universe, and I enjoy going on those journeys. Usually when I read through these, I say that there is one true ending, and that is the first ending that you got to on your own. But this comic fundamentally changed the way that I see Choose Your Own Adventure stories, and it's so unique in its premise and its plot, and I don't want to spoil too much, I just want people to go read it. The premise of this is basically Mariner is going through her everyday day on the Cerritos, and we basically journey through her and pick who she hangs out with and what she does for that given day. The beginning of this is also adorable though, as Mariner is waking up and we see that she has this thing called a Spock clock. There are many other awesome references to Star Trek media in the past in this comic book, just like this show has. I think Ryan North is so great at capturing all of the characters from the original show. He does an incredible job taking Mike McMahon's characters and writing them in the exact same way. So it just feels like more journeys that we get to go on with these characters, and I love it. I wasn't sure if my favorite T'Lyn was going to be featured in this comic, but she is. She briefly appears in a few panels, but it makes me the most excited that I've ever been. The one thing I will say, which I don't really consider a spoiler, but is teetering on the edge of it, is usually in media when I'm told from a mystery or puzzle, anything that requires math really irritates me. Why would you get me to do math? I don't like doing math. It takes away fun from the mystery for me. Except not only does it fit the Star Trek universe to use maths to solve this mystery, it fits the book in such a way that I'm not mad that that's how I got to to one of the conclusions, but it also fits the story to where by the time I was at that point, I was glad to have solved a little bit more of the mystery aspect of it. It doesn't throw you right into math and say, do math right away or you're not going to solve this book. It's very smart in the way that it does it. If you were interested in reading this book, I would suggest taking the journey slow, but don't be sad when it's over because I do feel like this book is an easy reread. I find myself wanting to go back to it a lot, not only to make sure I didn't miss anything, but just to experience the journey once again. And it's one of those books that even now that the mystery is solved, it's still fun to see other wacky timelines and all the other wacky adventures that go on in it. It's just such a cleverly written adventure, and I'm so happy that the same writer is writing the Star Trek Lower Decks ongoing comics as well. He has such a great handle on the style of Lower Decks, the characterization, that I hope he always writes the Lower Decks comics, honestly. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you got some really good comic recommendations out of it. I hope if any of the recommendations you take out of it, you will listen to me and read my #1 pick, which is Star Trek Warp Your Own Way. Read this. If there was any book you read from my recommendations, it better be this. Nothing else. I don't care about those other 4. They were a ploy to get you to read this. No, I do enjoy the other 4. They are good books. I'm just playing it up. Don't worry about me. But before you go, please remember to like, comment, subscribe if you like my content. It really helps me know if you guys want more of it. So, thank you so much for supporting.